It was a moment the world would never forget. The studio lights beamed down on the stage like a divine spotlight, casting a surreal glow on the two figures seated center stage. The live audience buzzed with anticipation, and millions watched from their homes, unaware that they were about to witness one of the most unforgettable exchanges in television history, not because of scandal, not because of drama, but because of a quiet, powerful stand for faith. John Kennedy, not the late president, but the rising author, humanitarian, and speaker, had captured the nation's attention with his bold message of compassion, truth, and unshakable Christian faith. He wasn't flashy, he wasn't famous for controversy, but he had something that seemed increasingly rare in the public sphere: conviction. And now, here he was, sitting across from Oprah Winfrey on her primetime special titled Belief. What do you stand for? It started like any other interview. Oprah, polished and poised, introduced him with warmth and admiration. John Kennedy, she said, smiling, your recent book Faith in the Fire has touched millions. Your story is remarkable, but I have to ask a broken bar. She paused, leaning in slightly, her tone shifting. A broken bar in this age of inclusion and progress. Do you really believe Christianity holds the only truth? The audience chuckled nervously. John didn't flinch. Yes, he said simply, I do. Oprah blinked. The silence was sharp. You believe that your way is the only way? That billions of people around the world, Muslims, Hindus, Buddhists, atheists, are just wrong? Her words weren't angry, but the tone was unmistakably incredulous, almost mocking. The audience shifted in their seats. Cameras zoomed in for reactions. Some gasped. A few even laughed. This was the moment many would buckle, the moment celebrities usually backpedal, soften their stance, offer some vague sentiment about many paths to the same mountain. But not John. He looked at Oprah with the calmness of a man who had faced greater trials than public scrutiny. Oprah, he began, I've walked through war zones with nothing but my faith. I've held dying children in my arms who begged me to tell them there was something after this life. I've sat beside mothers in refugee camps who prayed to a God they didn't yet know, but hoped was real. And every time, I've told them the truth, that there is a God who loves them so much, he sent his son to die for them. Oprah raised her brows. But don't you think that's limiting? John shook his head. What's limiting is pretending all truths are equal when they contradict each other. What's limiting is refusing to speak the truth in love, because we're afraid someone might be offended. Real love isn't silent. Real love speaks. The room fell silent, not because of offense, but because of conviction. You could see it in Oprah's eyes. The wheels were turning. She wasn't angry, she was stunned, not by his defiance, but by his gentleness, his sincerity, his unwavering peace in the face of what was meant to be a challenge. She leaned back, quiet for a moment. That's quite the statement, she said, almost whispering. John smiled. It's not my statement, it's his. I'm just the messenger. The next few minutes of the interview took a different tone. Oprah asked about John's journey, how he'd come to faith, why he'd left a lucrative law career to work with the poor, and what drove him to keep speaking in places where his message wasn't always welcome. He shared about losing his younger brother to addiction, and how he nearly walked away from God in his grief, about the night he cried out to heaven, asking why, and how in the silence, a verse echoed in his mind, my grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness. That night, he said, everything changed, not because the pain stopped, but because he realized he wasn't alone in it. I don't share my faith because I think I'm better than anyone, he said quietly. I share it because I know what it is to be broken, and I found healing in only one place. I want that for everyone. By now, even the audience had softened. There was no applause cue, no dramatic music swell, just silence of the kind that comes when something sacred has passed through. When the segment ended, Oprah turned to the camera. Her voice, always smooth and controlled, now held a slight tremble. I've interviewed thousands of people in my career, she said, but every now and then, someone comes along who makes you think deeper, who doesn't just speak, they live what they believe. John Kennedy is one of those people. Backstage after the show, Oprah reportedly approached John and said, I may not agree with everything you said, but you made me listen. That takes something rare." The clip went viral within hours. Some headlines mocked him, others praised him. But across the world, people were talking not just about John, but about truth, about faith, about the courage to stand when it would be easier to stay silent. And John, he returned home to his small house in Kentucky, to his wife and 2 daughters, and continued living the life he spoke about, quietly, faithfully, and without compromise. Years later, he was asked if he would change anything about that moment. He smiled and said, because sometimes, the most powerful thing you can do isn't to argue, or shout, or prove a point. Sometimes, the most powerful thing you can do is stand. And when you do it with love, even giants like Oprah might pause and listen. The message: in a world that pressures us to water down truth in the name of tolerance, courage isn't arrogance, faith isn't hate, and real love dares to speak the truth even when it costs something, especially when it costs something, because silence never saved anyone. And one man's faith, gently spoken on live TV, may have planted seeds in more hearts than we'll ever know.